He didn't raise his voice, didn't slam a door, just slid a thick envelope across the table, like he was handing me a restaurant bill. Then, real calm, he said, "I think it's time you stayed with your sister for a bit." After 42 years, that's how I got kicked out of my own house. The locks changed before sunrise, and that donation he made, the one I asked about over meatloaf last Tuesday, turns out it wasn't for orphans. It was a monthly check to his daughter in Florida, the one I diapered, rocked to sleep, the one he called his goddaughter, until the bank statement said otherwise. Lisa Morgan, beneficiary. I stood in our kitchen, my reflection warped in the toaster he forgot to take, the wedding photo still on the fridge, yellowed at the edges. The deed? One name. Just one. Mine. I didn't start out bitter. We started with dreams. Back in '83, we signed the lease on a crumbling storefront with a handshake and a $7,000 loan from his aunt. The cafe was nothing fancy. Linoleum floors that peeled at the corners. A cash register that jammed if you looked at it funny. No real menus, just dot matrix printouts we'd taped to the counter. But we were proud of it. We built it, brick by brick, shift by shift. I ran the register while 8 months pregnant. He scrubbed dishes with rubber gloves, 2 sizes too small. We'd take turns holding the baby when the sitter bailed. We cried the first month we broke even, wrote love notes on napkins when we couldn't afford Valentine's cards. He carried mine in his wallet for years, said it brought him luck. That was the version of him I held on to, the man who kissed my blistered hands after I scorched them on the espresso machine, who memorized my mom's birthday even after she passed. So when he started coming home later, I didn't panic. When he stopped carrying the napkin, I didn't ask. When he said he was with the accountant, I believed him. Because love, at least how we learned it, meant trusting the silence. But silence has weight, and sometimes that weight shows up in bank records, 3 digits off, buried in the middle of last month's ledger, just enough to miss on a glance, but not enough to fool me, because I remembered every number, every single one, especially the ones he thought I'd forget. At first, I thought it was just a mistake. The payroll deposit was off by exactly $6,400. Not enough to sound alarms, but enough for a woman like me to feel it. I'd done those numbers for decades, by hand, with a calculator older than my son, so I knew when something didn't sit right. I pulled up the statement, same date, same amount, but the routing number was different. Not our supplier, not a contractor, not even the guy who fixes the espresso machine when it leaks. I called the bank, voice steady, one hand on the countertop, the one we picked out together in 2003. It felt colder than usual. They hesitated. He usually handled the accounts, but I co-signed, still had rights. So they read it to me, line by line, and there it was, Community Roots Initiative. She said it like it was nothing, but I knew every vendor we've used since 1983. And that one? Never heard of it. I Googled. No website, no mission, no board members, just a P.O. box. Clearwater, Florida. Something about that name turned my stomach, like sour milk in the fridge, quiet but wrong. And then it clicked. That's where he used to send birthday cards. To Lisa, his goddaughter, the one I helped buy a prom dress for, the one I thought disappeared after college. Turns out she just changed zip codes. The next morning, after he left for the cafe, I opened the safe. Between tax folders and our old lease agreement, I found what he thought I'd never look for. I hadn't opened the safe in years. It was one of those things. We just stopped using it. After we moved the cafe accounts online, the old paperwork sat there like dust in a locked drawer. But that morning, I pulled out the key, waited until he'd left for the cafe. I told myself I was just looking for peace of mind. Instead, I found betrayal, neatly labeled in manila folders. There were wire transfer slips, photocopies of checks, statements from an account I never knew existed, under a foundation name I'd never signed off on, all routed through our business account, all to the same P.O. box in Clearwater, monthly, sometimes twice. But what stopped me cold was the note clipped to one of the envelopes. It wasn't addressed to Community Roots Initiative. It was handwritten in his blocky, all-caps handwriting I knew like scripture. It said, "For Lisa's school, keep this one between us." Lisa, his goddaughter, except she wasn't in school. Not unless there's a college program for women in their late 30s. I sat there on the floor, knees creaking like the old café stool I used to lean on during slow shifts. And for the first time in a long while, I couldn't breathe. It wasn't just the money. It was the secrecy, the familiarity, the ease. This wasn't a one-time lapse. It was a system, a quiet, practiced routine I'd never been meant to find. He knew exactly what he was doing and exactly who he was hiding it from. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. But that night, when he came home smelling like espresso and confidence, I asked him one question, and the way he blinked just once told me everything. I didn't scream, didn't cry, didn't throw the folder across the room like they do in movies. I just sat there, on the edge of our bed, still in my housecoat, clutching a piece of paper that cost me 27 years of belief. When he walked through the door that night, smelling like espresso and overconfidence, I asked him one question. What does Lisa need that I don't? He blinked, just once. That quiet blink people give when they're calculating a lie, fast. Then he gave me the speech, the one about privacy, supporting people we care about, how you wouldn't understand because you're always so emotional. That one hit harder than the ledger ever could, because for years I'd made excuses for him. When he forgot anniversaries, I blamed stress. When he left our son's graduation early, I said he had a migraine. When he pulled away in bed, I told myself I was just tired. Turns out I wasn't tired. I was being erased. And maybe the worst part, he didn't even fight to keep the illusion alive, didn't beg, didn't explain, just poured himself a scotch and turned on the game. That's when I knew this wasn't a mistake. It was a choice, long and deliberate, and I had a choice too. The next morning, I packed one suitcase, not because I was weak, but because I needed silence, my own kind this time, and space to remember who I used to be before I became someone's afterthought. The next morning, I didn't pack much, just a suitcase we'd bought on clearance before our first trip to Charleston, a toothbrush, 2 pairs of slacks, and the navy blouse he used to call my lucky shirt, back when the cafe still gave him butterflies. I didn't write a note, didn't slam the door, didn't even make coffee, though the pot was clean and ready, just like always. I walked past his recliner, still warm, ESPN still humming low on the TV. He'd fallen asleep there, scotch glass half full, remote tucked under his arm. I looked at him and felt nothing but space, not rage, not heartbreak, just a soft, steady ache where a partnership used to be. I locked the door behind me, not out of spite, but because some closures need to click. And as I pulled out of the driveway in my old Honda, I realized something I hadn't let myself think before. He wouldn't chase me, not because he couldn't, but because he didn't have to. He'd already replaced me with routine, with silence, with secrets. But I hadn't replaced myself, not yet. So I drove. No destination, no plan, just one thought spinning in my mind. If he could move pieces behind my back, maybe it was time I learned how the game was played. I didn't go far, just stayed with my cousin Linda 2 towns over. She had chamomile tea, soft towels, and the kind of silence that doesn't cut. On the 3rd night, I sat at her kitchen table, staring at a folder I'd pulled from our safe, the one he probably thought I'd never touch. Inside were old documents, tax filings, lease agreements, a copy of the cafe's incorporation papers, and there it was, my name. He'd never changed it, not even when the business grew, not even when he told people we meant him. On paper, I still held 51%. That changed everything. The next morning, I called an attorney, Nancy, a woman from my church, who didn't flinch when I said, I think I'm ready to take back what's mine. She reviewed the papers and nodded. You have leverage, she said, a lot more than he thinks. So we filed. I used a bridge loan, short term, from a friend who ran a flower shop, to buy out his shares quietly. He didn't even notice the paperwork had shifted until the next shareholder meeting. That morning, I walked into the cafe in a blouse he used to call my storm color. The room went quiet. He looked up from the ledger like I'd walked in from the grave. And then the lawyer read the updated ownership records aloud. He laughed, not out loud, just that little nose-breath chuckle he gave when he thought I was bluffing. But this time, I wasn't. He stood to speak, but I beat him to it. I didn't raise my voice, just opened the folder in my lap and let the numbers speak for themselves. He stood to speak, but I beat him to it. I didn't raise my voice, didn't flinch, just opened the folder in my lap and slid out the spreadsheets, one by one. Projected expenses, routing numbers, payments to a Florida P.O. box, all cross-checked, date-stamped, and notarized. A paper trail so clean, even he couldn't pretend it didn't exist. Nancy, the attorney, stood beside me. She didn't say much. She didn't have to. The document spoke louder than either of us. He scanned the papers with that little smirk he wore when someone tried to outwit him. But this time, the smirk didn't reach his eyes. He reached for the mic. Margaret's clearly confused. These numbers, Nancy cleared her throat. Mr. Carter, you no longer have authority to speak on behalf of the business. As of last week, per revised ownership filings, full decision-making power has transferred. Gasps, murmurs. One of the baristas, sweet girl named Carly, covered her mouth. He looked at me like I'd rewritten the laws of gravity, but I hadn't. I just read the fine print. For 30 years, I ran that place quietly. Now I would own it, out loud. He stormed out without a word, didn't take his ledger, didn't say goodbye. But I wasn't watching him walk away. I was watching Carly, and the way she looked at me, like she finally saw the woman behind the counter. He didn't say a word when he left the meeting, just gathered his papers with stiff fingers, like every page was heavier than the last. Didn't look at me, didn't say goodbye. I watched him walk out the cafe doors, the same ones I used to wipe down every night after close, while he counted the register and told me he was building something. Funny thing is, I still wanted him to turn around, not to apologize, not to beg, just to acknowledge I'd been there too. But he didn't. I stayed behind, helped Carly lock up, took the trash out like old times. The staff didn't say much, but their eyes lingered on me longer than usual, like they were trying to figure out what kind of woman walks through hell and comes out clean on the other side. That night, I sat on my cousin's porch with a glass of iced tea and a silence I finally liked. Not the kind that hides secrets, the kind that heals. But healing isn't a straight line, because just before bed, I opened my email, and there it was, a message from an address I hadn't seen in over a decade. Subject line, "You don't know the whole story." Sender, Lisa Morgan. My finger hovered over the mouse. I didn't know if I wanted truth or if I'd finally earned the right not to need it. I didn't open the email right away. I sat there on the porch, the glow of my laptop painting my face silver, the crickets chirping like they didn't care what secrets waited behind that subject line. "You don't know the whole story," from Lisa Morgan. Eventually, I clicked. It wasn't long, just a few paragraphs, but it was enough. She said she hadn't spoken to him in over 2 years, said he used the foundation as a way to keep her quiet, not supported, said she didn't ask for any of it, just wanted him to finally admit she wasn't some secret he had to fund from the shadows. There was pain in her voice, different from mine, but still familiar, and for the first time, I didn't feel betrayed. I felt free, because this wasn't just about a man and a lie. It was about the years I'd folded myself smaller, quieter, more agreeable, the way I'd edited myself out of my own story to make his feel whole. That night, I didn't write her back. Not yet. I just sat with it. I thought about all the women I know, Linda, Nancy, even Carly, who'd lived through quieter betrayals, the kind that don't leave bruises, but leave you doubting whether your memory's the liar. I thought about the café, how the coffee tastes the same, but the walls sound different, how I finally hear my own voice echoing back. I'm not sure what comes next. Some days I still check the driveway out of habit. Some days I wonder if he checks the balance sheet and feels the absence. But most days I wake up with a kind of peace I didn't know I was allowed to want. I water Linda's hydrangeas. I take walks after dinner. I sit at the cafe on Tuesday mornings and smile when Carly calls me boss. And I keep that folder, the one with my name on the deed, not out of spite, but to remind myself I was always part of the foundation, even when they built the house around me like I wasn't there. If you've ever been written out of your own story, I hope you find the pen again. And if you already have, tell someone how you did it. Someone out there is still looking for the ending they deserve.